Okay, so how do we even begin to make sense of this incredibly complicated world we live in? Whether we're talking about huge global challenges or issues right in our own backyards, the very first step is always understanding. So let's dive in and see how it's done. I mean, think about a question like this. We're often faced with these enormous, complex problems, things like poverty or injustice. And tackling them, well, it all starts with just getting a handle on them. A huge question like this one demands a really powerful approach. And it turns out, to really understand our world, researchers basically use two powerful toolkits. You can think of them as lenses. One lens is for measuring the big picture, and the other is for understanding the human story. In this explainer, we're going to break down these two fundamental approaches. We're talking quantitative and qualitative, using some real-world research as our guide to see exactly how they work. All right, let's start with that first lens. This is the quantitative lens, and it sees the world through numbers, through scale, and through measurement. Yeah, this is absolutely the view from 30,000 feet. Okay, so for our first case study, check this out. A project to find and map these hidden pockets of social vulnerability. And they did it across the entire Santa Fe province in Argentina. I mean, researchers took on this massive challenge using census data to pinpoint exactly where help was needed most, across a huge population. And here's the result. This map, this just brilliantly illustrates the power of a quantitative approach, right? They didn't just guess. They literally put vulnerability on a map, which took this invisible problem and made it totally visible. But how in the world did they turn all that raw data into a map like this one? Well, it's a pretty fascinating process. And the secret, it wasn't to look at what's average, but the complete opposite. The key was to look for the exceptions, the places that were just dramatically different from everything else. So in statistics, we have this term, an outlier. It's basically an observation that's so different from everything else that you start to suspect something else is going on. Now, here's the cool part. In this study, these outliers weren't mistakes in the data. Oh no, they were the most important data points. They represented communities with either extremely good conditions or, and this is the crucial part, extremely unfavorable living conditions. And an outlier isn't always obvious just by looking at one thing. This is what's so interesting about this slide. It shows what's called a multivariable outlier. This is a data point that might look totally normal when you look at one variable at a time, but when you start looking at the relationship between variables, it really stands out. So, for example, a person's height might be pretty average and their weight might be pretty average. But if they're, say, 5 feet tall and weigh 300 pounds, well, that combination of height and weight is a serious outlier. So the researchers analyzed data from all 3,237 census areas in the province. And by searching for these complex, multivariate outliers, they could uncover these hidden patterns of disadvantage that, honestly, a simpler analysis just would have completely missed. Okay, so that quantitative map is incredibly powerful, no doubt about it. It tells us where we need to look, but it can't tell us what it actually feels like to live there. To understand that, we have to switch lenses. We have to get off the map and get our boots on the ground. Because what about the problems that you just can't count? Problems like injustice or fairness or inequality. You can't put a number on dignity, right? You can't capture suffering with a statistic. And this is where that second lens, the qualitative lens, comes in. It's all about focusing on the depth, the context, and the richness of the human experience. Yeah, as this legal research paper points out, some of the most important concepts we deal with as a society, concepts like justice, they are inherently qualitative. They're about meaning and interpretation, not just measurement. So instead of counting things, this approach, it seeks to understand them. It does that by interpreting texts, by observing how people behave, and by really listening to people's stories. It's all about exploring the why behind the what. So here's the crucial point. These two approaches, they're not in competition with each other. They are built on fundamentally different and really complementary ways of seeing and knowing the world. One is searching for those objective patterns, while the other is looking for that deep subjective meaning. So which lens is better? Well, as you've probably guessed by now, that's completely the wrong question to ask. The real power, the most complete understanding, it comes when you learn how to use both of them together. Yeah, it's not about choosing a side here. It's about seeing that each approach reveals a different and absolutely vital part of the story. You could say one gives you the blueprint of the house, But the other? The other tells you what makes it a home. So let's look back at our map of Santa Fe. The data, the quantitative part, it points us to a location. You see those orange and red zones. But to really understand the human stories, the specific challenges people are facing, and the potential solutions within those colored zones, well, that requires the other lens. So, a complete understanding of our world really does require both the telescope and the microscope. The ultimate takeaway here is that the data that gives us the big picture, the scale and the scope of a problem, but it's the in-depth stories, the qualitative work that provides the meaning, the context, the soul behind the numbers. So I'll leave you with this question. What problems in your own community could be better understood by using both of these lenses? Just think about it for a second, from your local schools to public health, or even something like the traffic flow in your city. How could combining that hard data with real human stories lead to smarter and, frankly, more empathetic solutions?